of Safe from Harm, to provide Salvation Army officers, local officers, and employees and volunteers with the tools to effectively implement Safe from Harm, a comprehensive child abuse and vulnerable adult prevention program. So that's why we're here. We want to prevent any kind of abuse or negligence on our part. And here's the comprehensive approach. This is why we do it. We protect, and you can see it. I'm not going to read every slide because my voice will go. I'll read what I think it's hard to see. Okay. Everybody understand that? Okay. Why do we do Safe from Harm? Unfortunately, child abuse and negligence accidents happen, and they happen at your core. We try to do the very best for it to not happen, but all too often they do happen. And we know from recent news that predators target churches and organizations that serve children and vulnerable adults. We know that's happening in the Catholic Church right now. And so we need to protect ourselves to make sure that we're properly trained. The Salvation Army. And when you step in as a leader, you are the Salvation Army, so understand that. The Salvation Army is responsible for children and vulnerable adults in our programs. Safe from Harm is mandated by the Southern Territory. Every unit of the Salvation Army, 426 plus Salvation Army Corps, must participate in Safe from Harm training, be it live training like we're doing now or online training, however that division so designates. Corps and programs not in compliance with Safe from Harm are exposed to greater liability. Because if for some reason an accident or an incident happens in your Corps and you go to court, one of the first things that the lawyer, the attorney is going to ask, have you received any training? And if the answer is no, then we're in deeper hoo-hoo than we ought to be, because we are mandated to be trained in Safe from Harm. Now the objectives for Safe from Harm are these: to educate, you can read that. To enable. To protect. To reduce the liability. To build parental confidence in Army programs. When a parent drops their child off at the Salvation Army, at your program, do they feel good about whom they're leaving their children with? I would hope so. And then to prepare all of us to respond if and when an incident or accident occurs. I sort of skipped over the protect, but I think that's one of the most important reasons why we do Safe from Harm. I had a conversation with a young male officer several months ago, and he said to me, "Major, how can I protect myself from false allegations and accusations?" Well, when you're in a car, and if you don't have the second adult, but you're supposed to have the second adult, but should you not have the second adult, the driver rides in the front, you as the driver rides in the front, everybody else rides where? In the back, yeah. Even as long ago, and it's been a long time since my husband and I were Corps officers, but as young officers, if my husband picked up any of the Corps people, never ever did anybody ride up front. That's just a safety precaution, and that goes for the ladies as well. Unfortunately, the men get picked on a lot with the Me Too, and I'm not going to slam that, we're not going to go into it, but the Me Too issues that we're going through in the last several months, men get the brunt of the accusations, and so gentlemen, guard yourselves, guard your heart, and guard yourselves very, very well. All right, these are for you to answer now. True or false? Sexual abuse can occur without touching. True. Everybody's in agreement? Let's see if you are. There you go. Yeah. You can see the response there. All right. You did well on the first one. Let's see if you get any better. In 2016, nearly 600,000 children were victims of child abuse or neglect in the U.S. True. This is a sad stat. Look at it. You've got to protect these children. Here's the next one. Children ages 6 to 8 have the highest rate of victimization for abuse. Saying true? Yeah. I heard some falses. False. Let's see. No, there it is, false. And look at the very bottom figure. And why? Why does that age group have the largest number? They don't have a voice, do they? They can't tell. I think my battery's going up. True or false? Girls are more likely to be victims than boys. False. You're absolutely right. Yeah, boys are taught not to tell. Kristen, are there any batteries back there?
Yes. What kind?
I need a triple A. Triple A. Thank you. I'll trade you. Youth department always to the rescue. I answered this one for you. It came up. People who we know well or who have worked with kids a long time are probably not abusers, and that's false. It's usually the people that the kids know that abuse them. Most sexual molestation occurs in the victim's home. Everybody agree with that? True. Let's see how right you are. True. There it is. It's sad that the children who trust that person the most are the ones that become the victims and the perpetrators. Okay. Now here's a definition of maltreatment for children and vulnerable adults. Maltreatment is any type of harm to a child or a vulnerable adult by a caretaker. Intentional harm, okay? Not accidental, but intentional harm. And also it includes the act of commission, which is the actual assault, or the act of omission, which is a failure to protect. For instance, if someone comes to your core, a child comes to your core, or even an older adult comes to your core, and you notice bruising or cuts or burns, that type thing, and you don't do anything about it, that's the act of omission. And I'll just stop here a minute and tell everybody that the state of Texas is a mandated report state. So that if you think, or if a child or vulnerable adult tells you that they are being abused or neglected, then you have the responsibility to report it. Now here's how the reporting is to happen. You're to go to your core officer. Your core officer will do one of two things. They will make a call to the Family Protective Services or Children's Protective Services, or they'll go online and make the report. Once they make the report, then they'll call me, they'll give me all the details, and we'll go from there. So does everyone understand? If for some reason you suspect or you're told that someone is being abused or neglected, you have the responsibility to report. Everybody understand that? Good. What is child abuse and neglect? And you can read this. Well, you sort of can. Physical abuse, and we all know what physical abuse is. You know what sexual abuse is. You know what emotional abuse is. You know the cliche, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you? That's a lie. Because our words we can never take back. If we tell a kid enough times that they're stupid or dumb or ugly, then they'll start believing that. Neglect is another type of abuse. Child on child, and we hear that more and more, the bullying. We got to put an end to that. And then the commercial sexual exploitation of children, we see it on TV all the time. And we just 2 days ago did the anti-trafficking observance, didn't we? Keep in mind, noticing just one of these indicators does not necessarily mean that abuse is taking place. You have to watch for a combination of these indicators, a repetitive pattern, the extreme indicators, and also we have to be aware of the cultural differences. I was telling the other group that when we were in our second appointment, our daughter had just turned 2, and she was very clumsy. She still is very clumsy. And Wednesday nights we would go to prayer meeting, and it always seemed that half an hour before we were to go to the core, she would fall and she'd have a goose egg on her head, or she'd have a cut somewhere or a bruise somewhere, and it got to be so frequent that I said to my husband, our people are going to think we abuse this child. She was a 2-year-old. She jumped off things when she wasn't supposed to. She climbed on things and fell off when we couldn't get to her. So you understand the difference. Little ones, it happens, but if we see constant marks and bruises and cuts and so on and so forth, you better take note and start finding out and questioning. Not interrogating, but questioning. Yes, sir?
On the point of being aware of cultural issues, one thing that comes to my mind is spanking.
Yep.
And I can see where, depending on what side of the argument you're on, that can be considered abuse or not. So how, for those kinds of issues?
Yeah. When it's excessive and when there are marks, there's a real difference. Do you remember a few years ago the football player who was arrested because he cut a switch and switched his child because that's what his grandmother had done when he was a young boy. So we have to be aware of that. But too much is too much. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you just have to watch that. And usually children who are abused act out in one way or another. So those are telltale signs. And you can read this for yourself. What are the consequences of child abuse and neglect? They're long term. Time to read it? Now the goals for this section. To identify who is most likely to molest a child or a vulnerable adult. identify the characteristics, to differentiate between the categories of child molesters, to list 3 things that enable the molester, and explain how a molester violates the boundaries. And we'll all get into that. And again, if you have questions, just give me a yell. Unfortunately, molesters don't wear the scarlet letter on them somewhere on their body. They don't have it tattooed on their forehead. They don't wear a specific kind of clothes. Molesters look like you and me. And so all too often, they're very hard to pick out. They could be a doctor, and we know that for a fact when we talk about the girls' gymnastic doctor, Olympic team, and the issues that he's gotten himself into. We've heard of daycare workers, which is really sad. Just in Dallas, daycare worker was arrested for the shaking syndrome.
Even pastors.
Lawyers and teachers, yes, even pastors, you're exactly right. And unfortunately, even children can molest other children. So there's a variety of perpetrators. Now here are the characteristics of a child molester. Every child molester is different, so it's hard to describe them as a group. And these are a few of the common characteristics. Most have been abused themselves. They would rather spend time with children than adults. They often do not have stable working history. They jump from pillar to post to keep from being sought out, burned. They like to be physical with children. Excessive touching, tickling, wrestling, that type thing. They often give gifts to children. They will not follow the rules. They seem very charming. It's kind of like that beautiful spider with his beautiful colors that lures the insects, and when the insects get there, they get caught in the web. So it is with the molester. Here are the categories of the child molester. The preferential. They prefer sexual contact with children over sex with adults. They spend a great deal of time getting to know the child before the abuse starts. These are the charmers, making the children feel comfortable so that they can lure them in. The situational molester. You know what the boundaries are? Every one of us has personal space. I like to think if there's a circle around me, and you'll notice if you get too close into my personal space, I'm going to back up a bit. It's not because you have bad breath, it's just I don't want you to be too close to me. It doesn't have anything about being rude. That's just my personal space. Now, I'm a hugger. I like to be hugged, but there are certain people that I'm going to think about, okay? And I just sort of step back and give it some thought. So that's your boundaries. And children have the same thing. And I think children more so than adults don't like people in their personal space. And then there are the indiscriminate. And these are the vilest offenders there. No conscience whatsoever. These are the guys and gals who lurk in bathrooms and in playgrounds and in that type area, just waiting for their prey. Here is some definitions of the preferential molester. You can read that. I'm not going to read it for you. There's some pretty scary things in that definition. They justify their actions by thinking they're doing the right thing. or doing what they do is good. And they always are loving and caring. Everybody got it? Here's a situational molester. We just heard of a situational molester in our area where in a senior home, the lady had been unconscious and in a coma for many, many years, and one of the workers impregnated her. That's the situational molester. They're very impulsive. They don't worry about risk too much. And then here, I think, is the worst of the molesters. If you're gonna, from better to worse, they're all bad people, but this guy, this girl, has no conscience at all, no sense of right and wrong. This is the molester we want to say to our children, stranger danger. Okay? Stranger danger. They enjoy inflicting pain. Doesn't matter. They just do it. Remember, both preferential and situational sex offenders operate in church groups. Beware, locals. They like the Salvation Army because we have lots of kids. And in some of our core, we have lots of senior programs. San Antonio, you know, Rebecca, you'll always be in San Antonio. I know you're in Houston, but I look at Mrs. Galvey's and I think San Antonio, because San Antonio has a big seniors program. Lufkin has a big seniors program. So be very, very cautious about that. Preferential molesters actively seek out children. I'll give you for instance, an officer told me the story that they were beginning to take applications for summer day camp. And a gentleman walked in and she thought, this is kind of strange because he was kind of older. And she's wondering why in the world would an older guy want to work with children? So, to use a very unladylike term, she had a gut feeling, okay? And so she said to the man, just a minute, I'll get your application because you're going to have to fill out a background check. So the officer went to her office, got the stuff. By the time she got back, guess what? He was gone. Yeah. Yeah, they don't want to be found out. But this here was a guy, and it seems like I'm picking on the guys, and I'm sorry, but here was a guy that was relatively and readily seeking out children. Situational offenders take advantage of opportunities that make abuse possible. Our summer day camps, our after-school programs, our Boys and Girls Clubs, our community centers, those are the opportunities and they take advantage of them. Remember, most children know their abuser, therefore stranger danger is not always appropriate prevention. And look at the little box that I put there. So many times we hear, and we've been told to mind our own business. Well, in this case, don't mind your business when it comes to protecting children. Okay? Don't mind your business when it comes to protecting children. These molesters must have enablers, and there's 3 of them, and there they are: access, privacy, and control. Without those, there can be no molestation. So make yourself aware of those. All right? Watch for these behaviors. Someone who violates a child's physical boundaries. We've already talked about boundaries. Watch for people who look for opportunities to be with a child alone. And watch for people who would rather spend time with a child than with an adult. Now think about it. How many of us in here would rather spend time with a kid? I don't think so. I love my grandchildren, but about 4 days and I'm ready to go home. And I'm ready for them to go home, as much as I love them. Someday you might be the only person between a child and a child molester. Think about it. What an awesome responsibility you and I have as volunteers, as local officers, as workers in our Corps to protect those who can't protect themselves. Questions to consider. These are for you to answer right now. Why do molesters touch in completely acceptable ways? Why do they do that?
Build trust.
To build trust, exactly right. Kristen or Ian, would you make sure that my little thingy is plugged in my computer, because this isn't responding as well as I like it to, and it worked better. It's on the opposite side, I think, on the left. Yeah, plugged in. Okay, all right. They start grooming the child, and they get the child to trust them. What does the molester encourage in order to keep a child from telling? Secrecy. What is it? Secrecy. Secrecy? Ifs. Oftentimes, they allow children to do things that their parents wouldn't let them normally do. Drink, smoke, view pornography, that type of thing. True or false? To prepare a child for abuse, the molester may manipulate a child's emotions by giving compliments. True. What a pretty little girl you are. What a handsome, strong young man you are. Why would a molester encourage a child to participate in activities that would get a child in trouble? Yeah, you're exactly. Blackmail, isn't it? Blackmail. Yeah. Yeah. True or false? Most victims are molested by someone in their own family. True. 60% know their predator, but are not relatives. 30% are relatives. Something for us to think about. What 3 things must the molester have in order to abuse a child? Access, privacy, control. Yeah. And a good liquor. Don't give it to Colonel tonight. It's just a liquor for the person. Now, I would hope that you're able to identify those most likely to molest children, to identify the characteristics, to differentiate the categories, to list the three things, and what are they? What enables a molester? Access. Okay. And then explain how molesters violate a child's boundaries, and we know they just take advantage of children, and that's the bottom line. Safe from harm guidelines. Everybody understand about the 2 adult? This is the rule that gets the most resistance and complaints and whining and griping of the whole world when it comes to the Corps. I'm very much aware that some of our Corps are so small that we don't have the afforded luxury of having 2 in a classroom. I understand that. But there are ways to do this so that your children are properly protected. If you only have 1 adult per class, keep your doors open and assign a monitor, okay? So that while the classes are going on, the monitor's walking up and down, looking in the classes to make sure that the children are protected and the teacher is protected. Because now we know a lot of times it's a he said, she said thing, and we adults have a hard time defending ourselves. So that's one idea. And when we attended the Waxahachie Corps, our Corps officer, Frankie Zuniga, asked my husband and I to teach the beginner's band. And we did. But we had different levels in the beginner's band. So my husband gave me the honkers, those that could barely blow their nose, let alone blow a horn. And then he had the more advanced group. We didn't have any more local leaders who were musicians. And so what Mike and I did was, I took the Sunday school class that had the bigger room, put my kids in there with the door open, and Mike took his group right out the hallway on a pew so that he could see me and I could see him. And so we were, therefore, safe from harm compliant. There's ways to get around it, and by around it, I don't mean forget it. There's ways to do it so that it works for you. You just have to find the right way to do it. Probably the best building in the division that I've been to that fits the criteria for safe from harm is Houston International. If you walk down their hallways of their classrooms, either the door is fully glassed or a wall is fully glassed, so that when you walk down that hall, you see everything that's going on in the classroom. But we don't have that luxury in our buildings. Irving certainly doesn't have that. No, Cleveland doesn't. And Waco's such an old building that they have a little tiny peephole type thing in there. So you have to do what you have to do to make it work. Oh, I was going to say about the 2 adults as well. Some of us have the understanding that it can be an adult and a kid. No, it can't. They have to be 18 to be considered an adult. Now, if, let's say you're in the nursery and you have yourself, the adult, and you have a 16-year-old, that's fine. But don't leave the 16-year-old in charge. They cannot be in charge, so understand that. They can help, and that's a great way for you to start mentoring leaders, but they cannot be considered the leader. Does everyone understand that? Okay.
But they also don't meet the criteria of 2 adults. Is that what you're saying?
It will work, but they can never be left alone. Yes. Yeah. And again, that's one of those, and I have to be careful with to get around. I don't mean to get around, but to do your due diligence. That's a better word, to do your due diligence. And also, one of the reasons for the 2 adult guidelines is really to protect the leaders as well, because children know the routine, and they know that, oh, I'm going to, if you don't let me, then I'm going to, and then they tell a story, a fabricated story, and most adults have a difficult time wiggling their way out of that type thing. Appropriate physical affection is important to a child's development. We know that. Everybody likes to be hugged. Well, I shouldn't say that. My husband's not a hugger. And he would rather shake his hand. And when we were Corps officers, at the end of our service, on a Sunday, we would go to the back door, and he would be very, very quick to stick out his hand so that he got a handshake, because he didn't want to hug. But come on, let's hug. I was ready to hug. So you have to be aware of how a child reacts to that type thing and how we respond to them. The side hug, I'm going to use you as an example. Side hug, the slug here, okay, or the shove. So the little boys, it's a pat on the head. Little girls, if you're going to hug them and it's going to be a front hug, then make sure you're in public, all right? And so that you will be above reproach and it doesn't look like the appearance of anything wrongdoing. Because the children who come to us need hugs, don't they? And there's nothing wrong with hugs. But ladies and gentlemen, make sure it's from the waist up. Some of you guys like to do the attaboy, and that's unacceptable, all right? It's a waist up, it's a slug, or a pat on the head, or a touch, wave. Yeah, high fives, or a touch on the shoulder, that type thing. All right, everybody understand that? And if you know a kid who's reluctant and doesn't want to hug, then don't hug him. Leave him alone. Find another way. Have you watched on Facebook some of the videos of the teachers, how they're greeting their children in the classroom? Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Touching behavior should not give the appearance of wrongdoing, and as I said, be forced on a reluctant child. And workers are always responsible to protect the child. And by the way, if you have workers in your Corps that are working with you and you see that they're too handy with children, then you have a responsibility to tell your Corps officer. Don't try to take it on yourself. It's not worth it. Let Mrs. Galaviz take care of it, okay? She and the captain will handle it. Is it Major now? No. Okay, let she and the captain handle it. Our lieutenants will handle it. Your majors will handle it. We hope they'll handle it.
Okay, that's a good question.
Yes.
Anything else?
Yes, we had the same question in the last class. If your Corps officer is reluctant to handle a situation that entails abuse or neglect, and you've told them, and you've told them, and you've told them, call DHQ and ask for me. Okay, now I'm not going to listen to your whiners, okay? I'm not going to do that because all of us at one time or another don't like our Corps officers, okay? So I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just not going to listen to that. But if you have a legitimate concern, notice I didn't say complaint. I said if you have a legitimate concern that business is not being taken care of, call divisional headquarters. Now, I don't work at divisional headquarters anymore. I work here at camp. But my phone rings at divisional headquarters, and so all you do is call the receptionist and ask for me, Major McDonald. Phyllis will get you to my office. And you can always call the youth department. They know where I live, and they can get me, and I'm happy to do that. But again, I'm not going to listen to whining and complaining. I'm going to listen to concerns. All right, take care of it. If they would feel that, if they want to do that, that's fine. Yeah, but I'll walk you through the steps that need to happen, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
You know not to hear.
I do.
You know if you bring your phone with you, it'll connect.
Yeah, that's what I'm taking. My phone rings at DHQ and here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it rings in my old office and here.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, everybody understand that? You know how to get to me, but I'm not going to listen to whining and belly aching, okay? I'm going to listen to concerns. Overnight activities, I don't know why you would want to do overnight activities. I'm too old for this. I remember in the old days when we did do lock-ins in our Corps, we were far much younger and stupider. But if you do have the overnights, then make sure that you have the appropriate chaperones, females with females, males with males, okay? Never appropriate for an adult chaperone to share a bed with a kid unless, of course, it's their own child. That's almost a given, isn't it? Should be. Here's what we need to take note of when it comes to discipline. Corporal punishment, hitting or spanking, or other forms of punishment involving physical pain are not appropriate in Salvation Army activities. This guideline holds true even if a parent have suggested or given permission for corporal punishment. All too often we know every aunt and uncle and grandma and sister and brother and cat and dog of each other in the family. And somebody will drop their kid off and say, if he or she gives you problems, just smack them. I don't care how many times they've said for you it's okay, it's not okay. And parents, if you have your own children attending a function, a program at the Corps, and they get out of hand, don't smack them there. Take them home. Take care of business. But don't do it at the building. Workers also must consult their supervisors if they need help with misbehaving youth or other discipline area. Sometimes we've had a long day. I mean, you all work long hours, and you get to the core, and these kids get on your last nerve, okay? And rather than yelling and screaming and getting all bent out of shape, if you just can't handle it, go and get help. It's okay. It's not a bad thing to ask for help. I just talked to someone a little while ago. It was in the last class that said that in one of the classes that she teaches, there's well over 22 kids and just her. That's too many for her to handle. I mean, kids climbing under desks and jumping off chairs. Get help. Go to your core officer. That's why they're paid the big bucks, okay? To supervise you and to help you to the best of their ability. This is never acceptable. There's days when you feel like it, but it's never acceptable. Leaders, beware. Raising your voice and yelling is not acceptable. The way we talk to our children become their inner voice. I had the privilege of being the Divisional Youth Secretary in Maryland, West Virginia. And our cook was an older lady, Miss Dorothy, and she yelled at the kids all the time. But the kids loved her anyway, but it just drove me crazy. And so finally I pulled one of the officers aside that had been there a long time. What's the deal with Miss Dorothy? She said, oh, that's just the West Virginia way. And soon Miss Dorothy learned that it might be the West Virginia way, but it wasn't the Camp Tomahawk way. And that we didn't yell at kids. And so if that's your MO, yelling at your kids at home, change your MO when you get to the core, because it's not appropriate and it's unacceptable. In fact, yelling is really a sign of loss of control, and we don't want our kids to see us lose it, do we? They need to see us cool, calm, and collected, especially with dealing with them, because they got enough junk to deal with at home. I used to say to my counseling staff at camp on the summers, if a kid spills milk, so what? Get up, clean it up, and go get them another carton of milk. It's not the end of the world. We've got 10,000 cartons of milk. Kids need to be kids, and they need to enjoy life. And when they come to the Salvation Army, when they come to our programs, they need to feel safe, and it needs to be a safe refuge for them, free from all the garbage that they deal with at home. Yes, sir?
What do you do with children whose environment is a yelling environment and they don't respond or don't listen until you get to that point?
You'd be amazed at how quickly they'll adapt, how quickly, and it could be, wait, I'm going to use you again, it could be very much that you're going to have to put both hands on shoulders and just speak to them and say, I expect you to listen to me, I know that you can do this, you know. And be very, very soft in your tone, but be very, very, very firm in how you present yourself. Yeah. But children adapt very quickly to change, especially. Just some ideas to get kids' attention. The countdown, you know, the 5, 4, 3, 2, so on and so forth. When I taught the singing company at Atlanta Temple, I used the clapping method where I clap a certain rhythm and expect the kids to respond back to me, got their attention. There's the chants that you can do. One of the tricks that I learned, and I don't know where I picked this up from, was I would just come to the microphone and simply say, let me have your attention. If it didn't get their attention, then I would say, again in the microphone, I'll wait. And just pause a minute and then say, but not for long. And it was amazing, the kids' response. Again, when I was at DYS and the dining room would get out of control with loudness, I would just step to the microphone and start singing. And sing a song that the kids like, Baby Shark or whatever. And they would start singing with me, and then we would have control of the dining room again. So you just have to figure out what works for you. My staff staff knew that I always sat at the same place in the dining room every day, and so I normally tried not to get up, but my staff knew that when I started to get up, something was going to happen, and so they began to prepare their table or their activity. Hey, the major's going to say something. So you can train, it's kind of like Pavlov's law, you train them to ring a bell, that type of thing. So you just have to learn the tricks of the trade. What is the program of the Salvation Army? It's any activity you do with children and vulnerable adults. And in those programs, it is our responsibility to keep these children safe. 3 common mistakes. Understaffing, and we've talked about that, how we can fix that. The lack of planning or foresight. Not being prepared when you get there. Make it up when you get there, or think about it in the car on the way to your character building programs. You got to have a plan, and it's got to be A, B, and C, depending on what happens when you get to the Corps. And then the other thing is the casual attitudes. Oh well, whatever happens, happens. Kids like structure, believe it or not, and they want to feel like somebody's in control, knowing what they're doing. Here's the worker ratio. Again, the bottom line is you'll see it's always 2. Good questions to ask yourself about your program. Would I feel comfortable if these were my own kids? And now what I have to say is, would I feel comfortable if these were my own grandchildren? Would I want to drop them off at your program and know that they were safe? And then, the most scary thing for me is, how in the world would I explain to a parent that an incident or accident occurred? Can you imagine what you would have to say to a parent? I wouldn't want to think about it. Scary. Transportation. I understand the 2 rule. I understand that, and a lot of times we can't do that. We've just talked with territorial headquarters, and they are looking into the possibility of us using the nanny cams. You know what nanny cams are? And I said to them, let's put it on the passenger sun visor and take the cam, But then they brought up the question, but what about the back? And you've heard this at officers' councils last week. And so what they're saying, if you're going to have to use the nanny cam, which I'm in favor of, they're cheap, $99. You don't even need a requisition for that. Buy the nanny cam, but buy 2, and put one in the back and one in the front, because the stuff that goes on is not going to happen up front. It's going to happen in the back, isn't it? Yeah. So that's just something to think about. Also, I know that some of you like to be kind-hearted and good-natured, but if they're not your own children, don't transport them in your private vehicles, okay? For insurance reasons. They must be transported in a Salvation Army vehicle, and you must be vehicularly approved. So, they have to do the DMV report, is that what they call it? Yeah. Your Corps officer will give a copy of your driver's license to divisional headquarters, and they'll check your driving record. I don't know if they still, because we've been retired such a long time, I don't know if they still check the insurance or not on your vehicle, but they might. Do they, Sandra? You work in finance, and you might know that. Yeah. Take note. When a child discloses, when a child or a vulnerable adult comes to you and says, hey, I got something to tell you. Here's what we need to do. First of all, we got to believe the kid, okay? All right? Secondly, we got to stay calm. We don't start screaming, oh my goodness, oh my God, get all creepy about the whole thing. Just stay calm and listen to it. Provide a safe place to talk, but when providing that safe place to talk, what is always necessary? With an open door, okay? All right? Don't make promises you can't keep. This kid's gonna tell you some pretty tough stuff. They're gonna say, but please don't tell anybody. And you can't make that promise. Why? Because Texas is a mandated court state. Okay? Everybody understand that? Don't judge the offender and don't judge the offense, as tough as that is. Report immediately. If I have one thing that just really bothers me and ticks me off about safe from harm is the lack of reporting. You would be amazed at how many reports I get 3, 4 weeks, months after the fact. I want to be called immediately. My phone is always on. If you call my office phone, it'll say, if you're calling to report a safe from harm issue, please call my cell phone immediately, and it goes straight into my cell phone number. I want to know immediately when the incident or neglect or whatever happens. I want to know immediately. Tell the child what's going to happen next. If it's really, really serious, then they need to know that you're going to call the FP, whatever it is, the CPS, okay? The Family Health, so there's a family, what's it called? The Department of Family Health Protective Services. And leave the investigation to the professionals. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you have to report an incident, once you report it, leave it alone. Your corps officer will call me, I'll get the report. That's why they pay me the big bucks, because I get to investigate the stuff. Okay, you don't need to worry about it anymore. Trust me, it's in good hands with me. Okay, I know what to do, and I'm going to instruct your corps officers in every step as to what needs to happen next. And then if it's really something that's horrific and traumatic and just eating at you and you just can't get away from it, go get yourself some professional help. There's nothing wrong with getting professional help if you've been exposed to something like child abuse. Don't attempt to counsel beyond your qualifications. And then, again, encourage professional help if needed. Anybody ever seen one of these before? This is the incident report that your corps officer, once you report an incident, fills out and sends to my office, okay? Along with it comes written statements from the witnesses, written statements from the alleged victims. They send all of this to me. Then what happens is, I, of course, call the corps officer, and we have a chat and try to get to the bottom of things. And then all of this goes to territorial headquarters, and they keep it on file to write all of this, then have them dictate, and then just have them sign it, okay? Everybody understand that? And why do we do all this? Bottom line, just to keep the kids safe. And now, there's no excuse why any child who comes to your facility cannot be safe. You've been trained, you've seen the slides. Now the bottom line is just go home and make sure you do your best to keep your children safe. Are there questions that I can answer? I hope I did, yeah. Any questions? All right, then I've done all the damage I can do. So thank you for your attention. If you've not signed up, please do so that I can notify your officers. And thank you for your attention.